Good morning. Welcome to the Science of Mind class here at CSLDallas. I'm Dr. Petra, and we are in the chapter In the Beginning God in the Science of Mind. And we are finishing up this first section. So we're on page 67 if you're following along. A deep inquiry. Okay, so I'm going to start out with the suggestion that if you do not have a cup of coffee, you should go get it. Because we are diving into the philosophy. So one of the things that is so important about New Thought, and especially about the science of mind and this piece of written work, is to realize that this is not purely a self-help book, nor is it purely an opportunity for us to explore and experience a deeper spiritual experience. Ernest Holmes was absolutely engaging in the philosophical conversation that has been happening in the West and the religious conversation that has been happening in the West over the last 5, 6, 7,000 years. And it sometimes you'll notice that some of the writing is potentially a little challenging if one is not used to thinking or reading philosophy. Religion tends to want to answer the question how everything got to be here from a religious point of view, right, from God. Philosophy actually wants to answer the question, what's happening and how did everything get here, from a point of view that we can, well, shall we say, reason ourselves to, that we can have some sense of understanding. And of course, the mystics, they bring us answers to the question through the mystical experience. And in the science of mind, what we're constantly looking for is where do these things meet? Where is that shared understanding? And so, well, so that's the first thing, is we have to engage, if we're going to read the science of mind and we're going to practice the science of mind, we actually have to engage in the philosophy of it. And this philosophy is essentially a theory of the nature of reality. Right? And so that's what the philosophers have been doing. Plato had the theory that everything started with an idea. Aristotle had the theory that nothing is really real unless you experience it. Locke and Hume, they had the theory that human life is nasty, brutish, and short. And Augustine had the theory that everything about this life is bad and wrong and sinful, and we have to rise above it. Right, and so all philosophies basically have a theory of the nature of reality, and it is an opportunity to look at experience, to look at the lived experience of it. But essentially, philosophy, to a certain extent, is simply a giant thought experiment. It's just a giant thought experiment. If this is true, then maybe this is also true. And well, if those two things are true, it implies that this other thing might also be true. And does that then in some sense correlate either with our experience physically, our experience mystically, or the way in which we are engaged with this I don't want to say trying to figure it out or analyzing it. It's really more a thought experiment is simply an extended contemplation. And then you feel into it. You feel into the words, and you feel into the ideas, and you feel into it, and you kind of get a sense for, how does that resonate? And not only how does it resonate with me personally, but how does it resonate with my experience? How does it resonate with the lineage of philosophy and religion and science? How does it resonate? Right? And we're constantly looking for those places where there is shared agreement, common ground, and seeing whether it points to something. Now, we can't necessarily know the nature of reality in its fullness. because it's the nature of reality. And we're like, we're finite beings, and we see things from our own perspective, and no matter how much we try to open it up, we're still seeing it from a human perspective, or we work to see it from a universal perspective, but we're never going to see the whole thing, right? And so we get to explore it and keep testing it out. And we can see that there are various ways of coming about answering the questions. And of course, what makes it a spiritual answer, what is that it's not based purely on physical facts. Right? A scientific answer is based purely on physical facts, or quite frankly on mathematical theorems and proofs, which may not always be physical facts. And yet the philosophical exploration helps us expand beyond the focus group of one that we are, right? Because our experience is still only our experience. And if we always only self-referential, be self-referential on whether or not something is true, we are, well, it's called in philosophy, it's called solipsism, it's called narcissism. It's assuming that everybody's having the experience the way that we are, and that our experience actually equals the truth. And so, right? And so we have to, so we do these thought experiments. So that's number one. The other thing about the philosophy and exploring the philosophy and the nature of reality, and I know sometimes it's like mind-blowing, the whole point of it is to blow our minds. That is the point, because we want to blow ourselves open to the fact that our brain and our physicality is designed to understand the world in only one way, and that is from a physical, limited, finite, separate point of view. And yet there are parts of us that are not any of those things, and we can actually understand something beyond that. When we do these thought experiments and we practice thinking from a philosophical point of view around the nature of reality, we are not engaging in belief. That is left to religion. Well, and in some cases, people are leaving it to science. I believe in it or I don't. It's not engaging in belief. The difference is, well, let me start that sentence again. Let me say why I think this is important. And I know I'm often a little bit in a minority about why I think this is so important that we do this thinking, even if we don't normally think of ourselves as philosophical thinkers. Having a deeper sense of the actual nature of reality as we understand it is, in fact, informing our beliefs and decisions. We may not know that, though, because we've never spent a whole lot of time thinking about what do we think about the nature of reality. If we don't confront our hidden acceptance that we're all separate beings, that only things that you can factually prove are true, that somehow there is something out there that we have to appease, right? If we don't confront our understanding of the nature of reality, we can change the words of our spirituality all we want, but we won't actually change the construct from which we engage. We don't have to believe that gravity is going to hold us to the ground when we get out of the bed. We experience it. We learn about the theory of it. We learn about how it works. And if we decide to go into certain explorations, our understanding of gravity allows us to fly, to go to the moon, to go to Mars. It's because we understand the nature of reality, that piece of reality. Do you see? And so I get a lot of people who don't like this first part of the textbook, but I'm going to really encourage you to dive in and to ponder, right? These are thought experiments and contemplations. And we're going to be invited to contemplate, how do we allow the ideas to work us so that we can construct a different picture of the nature of reality. And if you're studying quantum science, you know it's blowing our picture of reality right out of the water. And a lot of it's a little, you gotta look at it sideways out of the corner of your eye, because you can't quite get a hold of all of it, right? And we're going to do the same thing here. So that's why we're on this section called a deep inquiry. If we were to examine the basic principles of the religions of the world, we would find a great similarity. Each points to one central life, from whose self-existence all draw their livingness, and without which nothing could exist. How many of us have ever contemplated that sentence before? One eternal life, from whose self-existence all draw their livingness. So we're already beginning to build or have a suggestion of the nature of reality. So it has something to do with livingness. What would we think about livingness, right? The aliveness of everything, which flies in the face of the deadness of matter, doesn't it? Flies in the face of the deadness of the rocks and the planet, and that only things that are animate are alive. This livingness and this idea of one central life from whose self-existence all draw, right? Because this is the question, well, what was before creation? Well, God. Well, what was before God? Where did God come from? Well, if there was a God before God, where did that God come from? Well, where did it start, right? And of course, we're faced with that from a scientific point of view. Well, there was a Big Bang. Okay, and what was before the Big Bang? Oh, and what was before that? And what was before that? So in philosophy, they call this the infinite regress. And you never get to the end. You never get to an end, right? Which flies in the face of in the beginning. Poof. Everything came. Well, but from where? Who poofed? What started it? Well, where did that come from? Okay, so in New Thought, in Science of Mind, in Metaphysics, we use the term self-existence, which means no beginning and no end. Eternality, infinite eternality. Never started, never stops. It is simply the nature of reality. Do, 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 do. And then our brain just goes, I can't. Okay, cause and effect, beginning and end, morning and night, day and night, up and right? And because we're designed to catalog, separate pairs of opposites, think about, all of these things. And so it is our consciousness that has needed an in the beginning. Because that's how we experience life. Things start and stop. And so the very first thing is to begin to do whatever thought experiments we can to really begin to blow out this idea of no beginning and no end. So for me, this, I'm just a nerd. I don't know what else to say about it. I started working with a number line. Do you all remember the number line from what? 4th grade, 3rd grade, right? And you got the positive number line. And I remember being blown away that you could always add another number. Didn't matter how many numbers you had, you could always add another one. It's like that. And then there's a negative number line that goes equally as infinitely in the other direction. Okay, my brain personally cannot actually contain the entirety of that. But I can do the thought experiment of no matter how many numbers I have, I can add another number. Do you see? That's what it means to do a thought experiment. We will never be able to contain the allness of it, but we can begin to grasp something that has no beginning and no end. And even if our brain goes on tilt about it, right, we can continually contemplate this idea, self-existence, and that this is a part of the nature of reality itself, not just of physical universe, but of reality in its totality, the tangible and intangible, the infinite eternal reality of life, right, of the one central life, without which nothing could exist, because it is the one life. All right. So he's going to talk about the Christian religion, which is really wonderful, and what it adds is this unique understanding of the individual through the story of the teachings of Jesus. And then the last paragraph, the top of page 68, the deep thinkers of antiquity, as well as the philosophers of all ages, have meditated long and earnestly upon the nature of the divine being, right? This one central life. Knowing that there could be but one ultimate reality back of all things, they have pondered deeply as to the nature of that reality. And it is significant that most of the great thinkers have arrived at similar conclusions. Notice that it says meditated on, not analyzed, not intellectualized, right? Meditated and pondered. In the Western tradition, we call that contemplation, and allowing and on the nature of reality. And so you might not think of yourself as a philosopher, but that's what we're doing. To meditate on, ponder, to deeply inquire into the nature of reality, and to ask ourselves, what is the way in which we can examine and hold it that pulls all these disparate threads together and that answers the question, why is life always seeking to express more life? Right? So, the next portion of this is the 4 specific ideas that are pulled and seen as part of this similar conclusions that the great thinkers have arrived at. The voice of God in creation, the thought of God, the spirit knows itself, and volition. And of course, we use the term God. Ernest Holmes used that term God because it's the one we're most familiar with in terms of talking about the divine reality. It has lots and lots of baggage with it, so eventually we do let go of it, but for now, that's what we're using. So we're going to stop there and ask you, have you pondered the nature of reality? Have you ever pondered it? And how does that work for you? How does that make you feel to ponder these sort of mind-blowing things? And so that is our question for today. I'm going to turn it over to Ryan. He's going to invite you to participate. I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments. Good morning, Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Peacher, and good morning to you. And if you haven't had your morning cup of coffee, I think that should get you pretty awake, thinking about infinity. So that's very wonderful. And good morning to everybody here in the room. And for all the folks who are joining us all over the world, we want to say thank you for being with community today. And as you had mentioned before, this is an interactive discussion. And so for the folks here in the room, I have a wonderful microphone that you can speak into so the folks online can hear you. And my lovely assistant, I guess, the iconic Richard, he's not an assistant, he holds his own, We'll help you. And we also love volunteers here, if you couldn't tell. So if you see somebody with their hand raised, please hand them the microphone too. And for those who are joining us online via Zoom, you can hit the raise your hand icon located down below, or feel free to put your question or comment inside of the chat, and I can bring that into the room. And the same goes true for those who are joining us all over the globe. I see people checking in with us. I love it. Feel free to put your question and comment in the chat, and we can bring those in as well. Now, I do see that we have somebody here online, but I just want to poll the in-person audience here.
We have one. We have one over here.
Okay. Awesome.
Okay. I also noticed that you guys are in very lovely colors. Richard is in pink and Ryan is in yellow right there.
You know, they don't get to see the fashion
No, they
icons
don't.
that we are, but just imagine in your head just awesomeness. Okay,
There
that's
you
all
go.
I gotta say.
Good morning.
Good morning. This is Julia, and the question to me reminds me of the last 4 years being here and really digging deep into the science of mind and how it really has changed my thinking and consciousness to the point where I'm so much more aware, but it also helps you to realize how important understanding the responsibility and to have that conviction and to have that discipline. I'm good sometimes, and other times I'm not. I'm going to be honest.
Right. That's why we call it a practice.
But doing the practices and being and looking at the beliefs and doing my best to embody and embrace them makes a difference in my life. And I'm just happy to be here and be alive.
I love that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. Well, and you say something really important. You have, and I've watched you, right? And it's really the. Well, I don't want to affirm that this for anybody else, but it is actually the hard work of popping out of old ideas about the nature of reality. It's not enough to just stop using the word God and say spirit. It's not. It's not enough to stop saying, well, I'm going to pray to God and I'm going to take responsibility. It's not enough to just say, I'm going to affirm I am love. If there's no shift in the way in which we've actually constructed the nature of reality in our consciousness, we have not actually shifted our consciousness. And we don't become aware of the ways in which we are still operating out of those old ideas. And that's work, as you know, right? It's work, but it's so worth it. All right, Ryan, let's turn to whoever is have a comment online.
Yes. So, Connie, would you go ahead and unmute yourself and join the conversation?
Good morning, Connie.
Morning, Reverend Peter. So the question was, how does it make you feel, right?
Uh-huh.
And I feel great because I can choose. And I'm learning how to do that and how to open up my subconscious more so I'm aware of what I'm choosing. And so I love it.
Love it. I love that, Connie. Thank you so much. Yeah, in the next chapter, we're really going to move into what do we understand about the nature of mind, right? Because that's a huge piece of our understanding of the nature of reality, and to actually begin to access that. So thank you for sharing that. That's really great. We've got a comment here.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and get that mic on over.
Thanks.
I'm Willie. It's when I think about infinity, it's like, to me it's like zooming out from a picture of the night sky and just going further and further and further and further away, or going closer and closer and closer and closer. And And when I think about the number line, it just like leaves your periphery.
Right.
But you know it's still there.
Right, right.
And it's still going.
It's still going,
It's
still
still
going,
going.
it's
Still going. And it makes me feel so small because I think how the ant must feel crawling around on the ground, and he's so tiny, and here are these big giants walking around amongst the ants, you know, and what they must think of us, and, you know, being so huge, and that's how it makes me feel about that big.
And what if that infinite nature was actually the truth of your being?
It is, isn't it?
Then where does the smallness come in?
Just a different perspective, I think. I think it's just like seeing the universe from the ant's eye view. I don't know.
Good. Okay.
I don't know.
Right. It's something to think about, right? But
Yeah.
and so I'm just
Okay.
gonna suggest that that's how we normally see ourselves. We do actually see ourselves as minuscule compared to the universe,
Yeah.
right? Because that's when we're looking at life from inside our humanness.
Yeah.
But what
True.
if we looked at our life from inside the fact that we are made in the image and likeness of that ultimate reality, which is infinite?
So then we're just like spread out.
What right? And it's so and this is where we start, right? We start running up against our physical experience, which is why we meditate, which is why we have mystical experiences, because it is in the mystical and meditation experiences that we actually experience life not confined inside our humanness. What if there was an aspect of us that could actually sense life from a universal perspective rather than from the perspective of the ant?
That makes me feel really big.
Yes, right?
Yeah.
It does. Now, we're not all of that.
Right.
But there is an aspect of us that absolutely is made in the image. It has that same nature. And that's what we want to pop. That's what we want to pop through. We want to pop out of our sort of typical, either religiously motivated or just our own average experience of life, or the way that we've been taught. We want to pop out of that. What if we claimed that? What if we really understood that that was our nature too? Yeah. So it's just, and it can be challenging, right?
Yeah.
Good. Thanks, Willie. We have another comment here. Did we have one online, Ryan?
Yeah, let's go to the one online
Okay,
first,
and then we'll come back here.
right back
Uh-huh.
to you. Okay. Dr. Donnell, would you like to go ahead and unmute yourself and join us?
Good morning, Dr. Donnell.
Hey, good morning, you all. Good morning. I'm getting thrilled about these dialogues, these conversations. So I had two parts. It made me think about when she was speaking about the ant from the perspective, like the 3D, the way that we typically conceptualize perception and items. It reminds me of that picture of the fractal universe.
Yes.
Where you see a small piece and then you zoom in and it's another small piece that's a part of it. You zoom in. And it creates this whole world inside of a world, inside of a world, inside of a world that's ever ending. But I was thinking about how most teachers, they say that separation is an illusion. And we have this transcendental meditation that we do that brings us into this inner beingness that is one with all things. And we talk about the transcendental aspect being the ability for us to go beyond the personal ego.
Mm-hmm.
Our own personal ego creates this separatism where it only sees it from our perspective and it becomes so limited. And there's this quote that I love that says, if you see yourself as purely physical, then you will be limited to just the scope of your physicality. But if you see yourself as spirit, you now become infinite.
Yes. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that. And I love the example of the fractal nature. When we look at fractals, right, it is exactly that. It's called the self-similarity of scale. And that every time you take a fractal and then you take apart and then you blow that up, it actually is identical. And then you take the part and you blow that up, and the shapes are identical. And so it's the self-similarity of scale. And it really helps us maybe get a hold of this idea that even as individualized expressions of the universal, if the universal is everything, that infinite everything, right, that self-similarity of scale, there is that aspect of us that is exactly the same. And if we can blow that up and really look at it and see it, we will see our own infinite nature. And right, and so, I mean, in psychology, they tell us take a step back, observe it from the 30,000-foot view. In meditation, right, we're seeking to get the observer. We're seeking to be the witness. All of that, and or if we think about moving and looking for our higher self, all of those things are simply ways of popping us outside of our limited human experience, right? And the ego's not bad and wrong. It's just designed to help us manage the space-time continuum, right? It's only when we think that's the only truth about ourselves and we begin to operate from only that it becomes so problematic. And so anything that can pop us out into that universal perspective, right? And when I first started doing all of this, and I would just, drama. Oh my God, I was the drama queen. It was ridiculous. And I was awful. It was awful. And I learned to ask myself, okay, really, from the universal perspective, how important is this? Okay, we're talking about from the perspective of the infinite, this is a nanosecond. It changed everything. And I would say that to myself over and over and over again, each time trying to pop myself out of this, I have to protect myself, I have to figure it out, who's doing, right? From the universal point of view, it's like, Emerson writes in his essay on Safe Reliance, he says, the essay on the Oversoul, he says, in the Oversoul says, why so hot, little man? Why so bothered? Just go walk in the woods. It's great, right? Because we get all that, whatever that is. Now, this does not mean we don't operate in the world, obviously, but we operate from a different point of view. Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. Yes, my dear.
Hi, my name is Glenda, and it's interesting that we can talk about the nature of reality in mathematical terms, that we can talk about the number line, we can talk about the mathematical concept of infinity, which is a philosophical concept. And mathematics and physics and things like that help me understand what we are contemplating with the nature of reality. And so one day I wrote down the symbol for infinity, and I put down equals, the equal sign, infinity. And then I thought about how I am an individualized expression of the infinite, which is different from a part of the infinite.
That's very different.
So I'm not a part of it, I'm an expression of it, which makes me a whole of the whole, not a part of the whole. Which means that I am necessary, I'm a necessary whole of the whole, and that it is impossible for me to not be. And so when I looked at infinity equals infinity and I tried to do a -1 on that one side, it's a mathematical impossibility. Infinity cannot equal infinity -1. And that was something for me to meditate on for quite a while. But it helped me understand or get to some understanding. Like you said, we won't be able to embrace everything about the nature of reality. But it certainly got me a long way in understanding who I am in this.
And I think that we keep pushing people who don't think of themselves as intellectual or mathematical or any of these are not, like, we're not talking about calculus. We all learned the number line, right? We all learned what the infinity symbol means. And so this is not what for me, when I use physics or mathematics, it takes it out of the superstition of religion. It takes it out of there being a being, and it really moves it into that place of we're simply talking about the nature of reality. Now, we will get to the point where we recognize that the nature of reality, it's one of its fundamental properties, is actually love. And there is lots of warmth and color and connection and experience. But we have so enculturated ourselves to impress upon the infinite something that looks like us, as opposed to imagining that we actually look like the infinite. It's a very different thing, right? Beautiful. Okay, so here we go. So I hope you have your coffee and you're ready. The voice of God in creation. Here we go. This is an example of the same kind of thinking that Glenda was talking about. It's a thought experiment. Don't try to analyze it. That's the mistake. We're not trying to analyze the thought experiment. We're just trying to follow the train and see how it resonates and where it takes us. Okay, here we go. The argument has been something after this manner. The ultimate cause back of all things must be one, since life cannot be divided against itself. Well, let's start with that. What would happen if life were divided against itself? It would constantly be in conflict, and therefore it wouldn't be life. It will constantly be seeking to kill itself, which is the antithesis of life. So it can't have it. The ultimate cause cannot be a pair of opposites, life and death. It can only be one. The ultimate cause back of all things must be one, since life cannot be divided against itself. The infinite must be one, for there could not be two infinite beings. Okay? Taking Glenda's mathematical equation, infinity plus infinity equals infinity. You can't have infinity 1 and infinity 2 still equals infinity. Do you see? You can't have two infinite beings. It's an impossibility, because by definition then, infinite 1 is not actually infinite. Right? Because there can only be one infinity. Because even the number line from the negative number line to the positive number line is still one infinity, still a continuum, still one infinity, this way and that way. Right? I mean, I know it's linear, and any analogy is going to break down if we push it too far. But so the infinite must be one, for there cannot be two infinite beings. Whatever change takes place must take place within the one. Whatever change takes place, something comes into creation, leaves creation. Right? So just like in the quantum field, something pops into a particularization out of the field and then dissipates, pops into particularization, but it must take place within the one. But this one must be changeless. The one itself must be changeless. For being one and only, it could not change into anything but itself. What does that mean about creation? What that means about creation is creation isn't matter separated from the one. It is the one showing up particularized. It's made everything out of itself because there is only one. So the tree and the person and the bird and the star and the quasar and the whatever, anything that you can name as a physical thing has been made out of the one, because there is only one. There's not infinite cause and then infinite matter as if they were two infinite beings. Do you see? Can't have two infinite beings. You can only have one infinity. I love this about the science of mind, which means that the creation is actually included in the whole thing rather than this is sinful and bad and wrong and we're trying to get out of it or transcend it or... Okay. All seeming change, birth and death, seasons, good and bad, all seeming change is merely the play of life upon itself. And all that happens must happen by and through some inner action upon itself. Because, why? There's only one. So this whole thing about, good and evil, the battling each other, right, from a science of mind, new thought point of view, that is not true. Right? Now, it may be true for us as human beings, right? We each have the wolf, the good wolf and the bad wolf, depends on which one you feed, which has everything to do with our belief systems and are we living inside our purely limited understanding, or are we experiencing the universal nature of reality, right? But in terms of the nature of reality, and this is the other thing that's hard about philosophy, and particularly in our over-psychologized culture today, is to talk about these things without referencing yourself, without referencing your human experience. We are talking about the nature of reality, right? And when we psychologize it and we always reference our own experience, we're immediately in a different thought experiment, right? This is a thought experiment that does not include our psychology. This is the nature of reality. All right. Must happen by and through some inner action upon itself. What would be the nature of this inner action? Well, it could not be physical, as we understand physics, but would have to be the power of some inner movement of life. Right? Because we started out with life, one cause, moving on itself. So, i.e., the voice of God, right? Let there be light. God standing, meaning God. We're using the glyph, G-O-D, for the first, great, and only cause of all there is, the one. So, your homework for the week is to just take these two paragraphs and meditate on them every day. Just not try to analyze them and figure them out. Just keep exploring. How does that feel? How would I imagine that? What metaphor might I use to help me understand? What am I going to use? Glenda shared her mathematical equation to help explore this. What am I going to use to explore it? You're not trying to prove it to yourself or analyze it or make it right or wrong. What you want to do is read these paragraphs and see what they evoke and how they can reveal something to you. And see if we can engage in our own philosophical thought experiment. All right? and don't do it right before you're trying to fall asleep, okay? All right, good. So we're going to carry on with the other three, and we will focus on those in the next few weeks. I do want to make a very special invitation. We are having a really amazing mental health weekend, the third weekend in July, the 19th through the 21st. It's all about our mental wellness. And I don't know about you, but, I find sometimes the headlines are depressing. I can go in and out of anxiety. I have a tendency to have a little bit I can obsess about things for a very long time, right? And we all have some of these ways of being in the world that are not healthy. They're not mentally and emotionally healthy. And there's a spiritual aspect to the work that we can contribute to any therapy that we've all done, to any way in which we have been engaging in our own mental well-being. So if you find yourself with a tendency to be on a mental or emotional roller coaster, really invite you to join Christine Volkmer, Carol Merlot, and myself for this weekend. It's a Friday night, all day Saturday, and Sunday afternoon. And we're going to be using physical and spiritual and mental processes, all based in our philosophy, that hopefully will be another set of tools that will complement the tools that you already have and that you're already using. I have healed myself of panic attacks. I have worked with a debilitating fear of flying. I no longer have the depressions that I have had in the past. Now, we're not saying that this is going to replace your medication if you have clinical depression or if you have psychiatric issues. That's not what this is about. But we all are falling in and out of these sort of habitual ways of experiencing life. And we need to take mental health out of the closet, stop not being willing to talk about it, right? Especially in our positive spirituality. Oh, I'm not, everything is fine. Oh, everything is fine. Maybe not so much, right? But it is fine in the long haul if we can bring our tools to bear. We do have a hotel. We have a contract with for some really good hotel rates just right here. So if you're out of town, we'd love to invite you to come for the weekend. The information about the hotel is on the website. We have some people who are looking for roommates, and we'd love to have you here. If you're local, you can, of course. We actually have people who are staying here who are local because they don't want to drive back and forth. Of course, if you're local in the DFW area, you don't have to stay at the hotel. We're just having it here at CSLDallas. And we have a beautiful, not just deep spiritual and, yeah, some of the works, it's intense. We'll be Saturday night having a private sound healing experience to help wrap us in another way of energetically resonating with the truth of our being. So it's just a really remarkable weekend. We really want you to join us. Ryan's put the links in the chat. And for those of you in the room, you just go to the events page at CSL Dallas, July 19 through 21. The early bird registration ends tomorrow, midnight tomorrow. Early bird registration.
Today, it's the 10th. Early bird registration ends July 10th.
That's tomorrow. July 10th is tomorrow.
I'm living in the future, everybody. I don't know about you, but it's great over here in the future.
Ryan's already, all right, he's so infinite, he's already living someplace else. All right. So good. Early bird registration ends midnight tomorrow, so please do register. And then the registration closes altogether on the 14th of July. So by the end of next week, it will be closed. So please do take a look and sign up. And we'll see you next week. Bye for now.